On November 2nd, the Commonwealth of Virginia will elect its statewide office holders from governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, and every single member of the House of Delegates. This entire month, we're having our Conversation with the Candidates series. Today, we're joined by House member delegate Cliff Hayes of District 77 to talk about his district, his race, and what's at stake. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you, the community, to discuss issues that are important to you. Thank you again for joining us here on WNSB on the campus of Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation. It's the new sound of Hot 91, the soul of VA. First of all, let me give a shout out to our football team that won the Battle of the Bay. How exciting was that game? Tied 44-44, and in overtime, they overcame that deficit in a phenomenal game within itself. So hats off to Coach Odom. He's off to a phenomenal start. Obviously, the right man for the right time in this job. So they're making us proud across the board. And not just him, but all of our phenomenal departments, our colleges, our schools, our president, our alums. Look, the Spartan Nation, it is definitely our time, our place, and under the vision of our president. Again, we want to thank you for joining us here on Stay the Water on this beautiful Sunday in Hampton Roads. Marvin, I don't know about you, but I'm excited about this show. This is my time of the season. It's election season, but I'm excited to get out of the studio too and go out there and enjoy some of this phenomenal weather. So I'm going to get right to it. This season is our election season. And this entire month, we're going to have conversations with the candidates. We're going to have a conversation with the gubernatorial candidates, conversations also with the lieutenant governor candidates, attorney general candidates, and candidates for city office here in the city of Norfolk, the city council seat that's open, and a conversation with our alums who are running for re-election of the district seats. And today we have Delegate Cliff Hayes here with us, who's going to talk to us about his race and really what's at stake in this election. Delegate Hayes, welcome to Stay the Water.
Thank you so much, Dr. Claville, and good afternoon to Spartan Nation. Behold the green and gold.
The green and gold.
Yes, sir. I am so excited today, not just because the Spartans won the Battle of the Bay, but I'm excited because we have early voting going on 45 days prior to the election. And guess what? We even have Sunday voting in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's right. Today is take your souls to the polls and vote. Somebody asked me, why are you voting on Sunday? And then I asked, well, why are you at Lowe's on Sunday?
There you go.
Nobody sacrificed their life. Nobody hung. Nobody bled. Nobody died so that you will have a right to go and buy some tools on Sunday. But people have hung, bled, and died for our right to vote, and we need to make sure that voting is an opportunity that's free, flowing, without obstruction for people to cast their votes here in the Commonwealth. And so what's at stake is that you will potentially have all of the major gains that we've had in the last 2 years in the Virginia General Assembly rolled back. They will be rolled back just as quickly as they have come.
Delegate Hayes, listen, that's a very important point, and I want to delve into some of those gains that were made under this last historic legislative several sessions that we've had that you were a part of pushing legislation through. But before we get to that, I want to go back to the early voting piece, because we've been pushing the last couple of weeks, and we'll continue to push it out here during this entire month of our conversation with the candidates. when early voting starts. Now, we know that the election is November 2nd. It is on a Tuesday. You can vote all day. But early voting, which is something that was pushed during these historic legislative sessions, it started Friday, September 17th. So that means that all of us can go to our voter registrations office and we can go and vote early while the office is open and vote and get it out of the way. And not only that, but we can also apply. If you want to, you can apply for a mail-in ballot by October 22nd. That's a Friday. It's got to be requested. And once you do that, then you can mail it in and have that vote count as well. But you also mentioned not just Sunday voting, but the voter registration offices will be open on Saturday, October 23rd and October 30th. So in essence, up until November 2nd, you really have from this day all the way up to October 30th to vote.
Absolutely. This is the opportunity to get out there and cast your vote. It's never been so convenient for you to vote here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I can just remember, Dr. Claville, the many obstructions that we've seen in the country. You don't have to go far to find out what's going on in Georgia, Texas, and some other places where people are trying to roll back your access to the ballot box. But here in Virginia, we've made some historic gains, and I might make the difference. I need to make the difference. Again, I need to distinguish the difference between the Virginia elected officials who are a part of an official organization called the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, a group of elected officials who represent all parts of the Commonwealth of Virginia. But here in Hampton Roads, our own alum of Norfolk State University, Senator President Pro Tem, Senator L. Louise Lucas is a member of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. Senator Lionel Sproul is a member of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. Senator Mamie Locke is a member of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus here in Hampton Roads. In the House of Delegates, we have Delegate Marcia Price. We have Delegate Jawan Ward. We have Delegate Rosalind Tyler. We have Delegate Clinton Jenkins, Delegate Alex Askew, Delegate
Jay Jones,
Don Scott, and Delegate Jay Jones, and myself, Delegate Cliff Hayes, all members of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus who you've elected and sent to the Virginia General Assembly. Now, we know there are all kinds of hoodwinks and games and tricks that's put before our people to try to hoodwink them to fool them, to bamboozle them into thinking that they are voting for their interests. And so we have to be careful about these games. There's a group out there called themselves the Hampton Roads Black Caucus. That is not what Louise Lucas, Cliff Hayes, Marcia Price, Jay Jones, Lionel Sproul, Mamie Locke, Jawan Ward, Alex Askew, we are not a part of that. I don't know why on God's green earth the news would make it newsworthy to cover that organization has endorsed Glenn Youngkin. I don't know why that's news.
So Delegate Hayes, you're telling us that there are two caucuses, that have African Americans who are a part of it, but one is legislative and one is just a group of individuals. So the Hampton Roads Black Caucus are not made up of black legislative officials.
Not one elected official, period. Okay. I don't even think a dog catcher belongs to that group. But what they want to do is try to misrepresent what our people need. And we are supporting, all of us that I mentioned in the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, we all are supporting Terry McAuliffe for governor. We've seen what he's done in the past, including restoring the rights of more than any other governor, including all of the past governors combined.
That's right.
restoring people's rights to be able to vote in the Commonwealth.
That's right.
Including pushing for Medicaid expansion in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, today, we have over 700,000 people who have access to affordable, quality health care.
You know what?
Proven.
You know,
not promises, proven.
Delegate
not
Hayes,
promises.
Delegate Hayes, you think about that. Now, you bring up the point. We talked about health equity all through COVID. And it seems like a long time ago, but in our legislature, in the Commonwealth and across the country, people, the other side of the aisle, fought vehemently against expanding Medicare, Medicaid for people that don't have health insurance when it was paid for at no cost to the citizens in the Commonwealth.
Not at all.
The pandemic happened. Absolutely.
And without Medicaid expansion, we had hospitals about to go under because they were providing services to people, but yet there might have been situations where people were unable to financially pay because they didn't make enough money and they did not have benefits and health care insurance. But the Affordable Care Act under President Obama authorized states to expand Medicaid. And guess what? The ACA said, if you expand Medicaid, we will give Virginia $5 million a day to implement it. Wow. $5 million a day.
Wow.
And Virginia, the other side of the aisle, said no to Medicaid expansion. We don't want that $5 million a day. We'd rather these people not have access to affordable quality health care. But again, thanks to the votes of people and the sensibility of our people to understand what is humane. What is humane? Folks understood that. And there was a blue wave that simply took the posture, if we can't change your minds, we're going to change your seats. And so we changed some of these seats, and the Democrats took control. We've been able to expand Medicaid, as I said, here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're rolling out broadband expansion to make sure that people have access to a necessity, almost a utility these days. The next big thing, just like electrification was some years ago.
That's right.
Now we have people depending on the internet and broadband access for basic needs, like being able to televisit with your doctor, being able to go to school system saying the kids have to sign in and be online and all of this stuff. Well, that's a basic fundamental need for our kids to be able to get online and to be able to do so at adequate speeds so that they can do their homework. Why should anybody have to sit there 3 hours online because they're waiting for their stuff to download, as opposed to other people who download in a matter of minutes? That is not a fair, equitable education for all.
Wow.
And this Constitution says that every child of the Commonwealth of Virginia will be afforded access to a quality education here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Wow.
I just so happen to believe in that, as well as the fact that every community, every citizen needs to be able to have the quality bandwidth, information technology bandwidth, to fully participate in the economy and this democracy. And that's what I'm fighting for today. I held in my hand all day long a receipt of my grandmother back in 1965 here in the city of Chesapeake, paying her capitation tax, her poll tax to vote. That's a reminder to me that voting is not something we should take for granted.
Absolutely.
We should not take for granted. Imagine having to go pay some money to vote. Wouldn't that be something that's unfair?
Not just unfair, but think about it. I mean, you mentioned having to pay money, a poll tax, but even some of some other demeaning things where you had to take a literacy test, guess how many jelly beans in a jelly jar, the grandfather
a
clock.
bar of soap.
Yeah, I mean, but these things were real, absolutely real. But today, we can just literally, walk to our mailbox, fill out a ballot, drop it in. We can literally just go vote at our convenience still today. And I want to drive a point home when we talk about the percentage of voting and so forth. Various studies, whether it be Pew Research Center or other research centers, have shown African Americans vote at a higher percentage for, per their population, our population, than any other group in major elections. So we do exercise our right to vote. We, with the numbers that we have, about 45 million African Americans across the country, those who are eligible to be registered, to register and to vote, we get out there and do our job. But still, until we have 100% of our citizenry voting, our job is not done.
Amen, brother.
I want to go back and talk about a few things because I think it's very important for our listeners to really, really understand the job that you and others are doing in the legislature and why this election is so important. But I want to make sure we know that we're listening to the new sound of Hot 91, the soul of VA here on WNSB. This is Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, here on the campus of Norfolk State University during our conversation with the candidate series for the month of October, where we are talking to candidates who are running for statewide office and also in our districts. So we're starting this conversation off with our very own NSU alum, Delegate Cliff Hayes, representing the 77th district here in the House of Delegates in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Delegate Hayes, people, I think sometimes things get so good, we kind of forget about how things were so bad. and we become relaxed and say, okay, it's going to be like this always. But the gains that you've talked about and many more that I want to uncover in this half hour to next, it wasn't always that way. And it could easily get turned back. Can we talk about the Voting Rights Act, Virginia Voting Rights Act, that was sponsored by members of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, both in the Senate and in the House, and the support that you gave it and what it actually does? Because when we look at the tale of two states, the tale of two Confederate states, we did a show on it, the Commonwealth of Virginia, the former capital of the Confederacy, and Georgia. And look at the direction that we're going into, where Georgia is limiting access to the ballot box and the Commonwealth is giving more access to the ballot box. Tell us more about what that act does for our citizens.
Yeah, I just can't tell you how elated we were to see this legislation passed. And my good friend in the represents the Peninsula, Marcia Price, Delegate Marcia Price, has done a phenomenal job fighting for justice. And I always say with parrhesia. In other words, she's not mincing any words. She's telling it just like it is. And so Sister Price, along with, I believe it was Senator Mamie Locke on the Senate side, sponsoring the Virginia Voting Rights Act to make sure that we have access to the polls, unprecedented here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and somewhat mirroring the Voting Rights Act federally in the country before some of the pieces have been rolled back here more recently. Voting is a fundamental right and not some privilege that people want to try to treat it as. And so when people are asking you for your ID at the poll, maybe you don't have an ID. If most people understood the enormity of the number of seniors who may not have an actual driver's license to show their identity, they would be amazed. And then they say, well, you need your birth certificate. Well, if somebody is 100 years old, 90 years old, 80 years old, and they don't have their birth certificate, they may not be able to show that when they go vote. In fact, they shouldn't need it. They should be able to identify who they are, and if they just simply tell you who they are and their address, then that should be enough to cast your fundamental right to vote in this democracy. There should not be these obstacles and these games being played to suppress people from voting. I'll just tell you real quickly, maybe 10 minutes before this broadcast, I cast my vote on Sunday. So elated, so excited, so jubilant to be able to walk into a polling place, the registrar's office, today on Sunday to cast my vote. Unfortunately, all of that excitement and that crescendo of jubilation was dampened, was like a damp rag thrown on a fire as I came out of the polling place, and the registrar was taking up my signs that were there in front of the registrar's office on a busy street, just letting people know that as you come in, vote for me. I have a right to do that. These are places that are paid by the taxpayers as public property. Well, her response to me was that they had a memo or something from the city council that said that you can't put a campaign sign on public property. Well, I know all over this city.
Yeah, you can.
There are other folks have signs all over public property. And not only that, the registrar is not a zoning official. So if she's saying she got a memo from the zoning folks, then the zoning folks are the enforcement mechanism, not the registrar. And it's a shame that the registrar's office, including the registrar, would be there suppressing the fact that there's an election going on. They're trying to keep it quiet so that people won't be able to vote. The smallest property in the city with fewer parking spaces, not even enough necessary parking for if that turned out to be a bunch of people standing in line to vote, they wouldn't have a place to park.
Right.
But yet they hold Sunday voting at the registrar's office with little parking on Sunday with no notification to the people on the street passing up and down that an election is going on.
Absolutely.
And for them to remove my signs, we're going to have some problems because all over the city on city property, I see other people putting their signs up. But for some reason at this polling, the only voting precinct on today that's open.
Right. And again, we're telling people that on the weekend, you can go vote. You can go vote at your voter registration place. And when you talk about the removal of signs and these little things that are going on, this just shows us that these gains that we're making on the legislative end by signing the Virginia Voting Rights Act, by giving more access to the ballot box, more opportunity, that these gains can be taken away just by, every so often as we go vote. They can be taken just as fast as they were given. As a matter of fact, we've taken a look on this show at our neighboring state of North Carolina and the things that they're doing. Now, keep in mind, in 2017, they not only passed voter ID laws that were very restrictive, some of the most strictest in the country on the state legislative side, but they also took away polling places in one of the largest African-American counties. So they eliminated between 12 and 15 polling places, shortened the time, restricted voter ID laws. And the federal court said in 2017 that it was unconstitutional because this was created for surgical precision to eliminate or damage the African-American vote. Think about that. Surgical procedure. Yeah. And just 2 weeks ago, a state court nullified again a state legislative restricted voter ID law. So just our neighbors to the south of us, are still at it. And here in the Commonwealth, we don't want to take it for granted that these voting rights, this opportunity that we have is going to be here always.
That's right. We can't take it for granted, man. We have to keep this momentum forward for progression and to make sure that people understand that we should not take this for granted, man. In this city of Chesapeake, I know too many people personally who were on the front lines fighting for access and trying to make sure that the suppression stopped. This stuff is slowed down and stopped so that we have access to the ballot. And then yet here we are, that since these people have passed away, they try to slowly roll this mess back out. You know, we don't have a Bill Ward, who was the first African American mayor in the city of Chesapeake and the only in the history of the city. He is, God bless him, God rest his soul, passed on to glory. Dr. Hugo Owens, Dr. Willa Bazemore, all these leaders, man. I mean, those are just elected people. There are countless number of dry long so people,
that's right,
everyday people, fighting, trying to make sure that these gains have been made. I'm not going to sit back and just allow them to steamroll our people. That's not going to happen that long as I'm here.
Absolutely. And look, not just in Chesapeake, but also in the city of Norfolk. You know,
anyway,
we just honored Evelyn Butts, you know, a historical, marker by the MLK monument here in the city. You know, this is someone who was a housemaker of meager means, and that's being kind to say meager means. You know, she was making it just as good as anybody else could make it at that time period. But she had a drive, because she had a drive that said, listen, we ought to be able to vote like everybody else. So if just a common citizen who's working,
that's right,
doing the best that they can, you know what I'm saying? That is the way that we push things forward. And just also another NSU alum in the city of Virginia Beach who filed a lawsuit on her own in federal court challenging the way that you vote in Virginia Beach as opposed to at large, which we know dilutes the African-American vote, as opposed to wards. Again, just a common citizen doing the best that they can do to make it, that said, I got a passion to see that these gains that we have are not for naught, and they continue on, not just today, but also for tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. And as you mentioned, things going on in Norfolk and other cities here in Hampton Roads. Listen, let me just remind us of the great vision of Dr. Martin Luther King and wisdom in a statement: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we can't sit back just because it may not be happening in our city or whatever today. You know, if it's in a neighboring city, it's coming to a city near you real soon. If you don't sit there and watch this stuff, you don't jump in and be your brother and sister's keeper,
come on now,
and they help out what's going on around you in this region, in this Commonwealth, then things will be rolled back.
That's
and
right.
Don't be falling for the okie doke just because somebody is not perfect. In a sense that you think that they're not doing all that you want them to do as your elected official, so you get mad, and then you want to start some momentum for somebody else. Look, that's how we ended up with 45, with people falling for them gimmicks and tricks and not being excited about voting and having that apathy and saying, I'm not going to vote, lowering the turnout. You're part of the problem.
That's right. You know, and it's very important you mention that, because a lot of times we take these in messages, we become emotional. All of us are emotional, but sometimes we allow our emotions to take over our decision-making process, as opposed to sitting back, taking a deep breath and saying, what is it that I'm seeing and hearing that I'm not seeing and hearing, and really making an informed decision so that you won't, and we won't get, what we got several years ago, just total chaos across not just in states, but really just across our entire country. So it's very important.
I don't mean to cut across, but this is how these people think. I remember being on city council, right, reading my material before the meeting, making up my own decisions of how I was going to vote. And one of the members on the city council said, well, you need to listen to me because I'm the smartest one here on this council. I mean, just think of that condescending nasty posture that they think that they know more than you. I responded by simply saying, I got my degree from Norfolk State, training from Carnegie Mellon, Harvard, Cambridge, and the like. I think I know how to read. I can read my material and come up to a sound conclusion of what perspective I ought to support. I don't need you to tell me how I need to vote and to tell me that you're the smartest one on the council. Please. But that's the mindset of people that sit too long in a certain role. They think that they're entitled. Yeah, they'll tell you that you think that you're entitled, but it's not okay for them to say that they're thinking as though they think they're entitled.
That's right. Delegate Hayes.
This country says lift every voice and sing.
That's it.
Even the pledge says liberty and justice for all.
That's it.
All.
That's
all
it.
means all. Everybody.
That's right. Delegate Hayes, look, stay with us. We're going to take a commercial break, but we want to talk more about what's at stake in this election and delve into your race and what you've been doing in your district. So give us a minute, everyone. This is Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and our conversation with the candidate series with Delegate Cliff Hayes, NSU alum and representative here in the 77 District of the House of Delegates. We'll be right back after these commercial breaks.
Our voice is our crown. Join the Hip Hop Caucus and Teens with the Purpose Friday, October 15th from 6 to 8 p.m. at 801 Church Street in Norfolk, Virginia. Featuring the Hampton Roads Youth Poets, a hip-hop cypher with some of the best MCs in the 757, and Gabe Niles on the ones and twos. There'll be free food and prizes for every registered voter. Friday, October 15th from 6 to 8 p.m. 801 Church Street, Norfolk, Virginia. This is our chance, family. Let your voice be heard.
Program support sponsored in part by ALW Entertainment, a joyful holiday experience featuring Marvin Sapp, the Clark Sisters, Ricky Dillard and New G, and Leandra Johnson and Charles Jenkins on Sunday, January 2nd at the Hampton Coliseum at 4 p.m. For tickets, Ticketmaster.com. It's a joyful holiday experience, Sunday, January 2nd at the Hampton Coliseum.
Welcome back. This is Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Thank you so much for joining us for our conversation with the candidate series here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. On November 2nd, we will be electing members to our statewide office for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, and every single House district here in the Commonwealth from 1 to 100. Today, we have NSU alum and Delegate Cliff Hayes representing the 77th District here in the Virginia House of Delegates. Also a proud member of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. In the first half hour, we've talked about really what's at stake in this election. We've touched on voting, access to the ballot box, how the last legislative session and really backed by the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, the Virginia Voting Rights Act was passed and signed into law, ceremonially signed here on the peninsula by our governor several weeks ago. Not only that, but we also discussed the ability to actually go out and vote. You can vote early. And this is something that the last several historical legislative sessions was pushed through and passed to give more access to the ballot box. So early voting has started. September 17 has started that day. You can go out and vote early all the way up to October 30th. That's right. You can actually go vote on Saturday and Sunday at your voter registration office. Delegate Hayes went to go vote this Sunday at his voter registration office, and you can cast your vote. My wife and I, our family, we're going to vote early, and we're going to get it out of the way, but not just get out of the way, but we're going to exercise our right to vote with the convenience that the legislature has provided us. Delegate Hayes, I want to delve into and give our listeners an opportunity to let them know what you're doing in your district. You're up for re-election. There is a challenger for you as well, and we want to talk about the things that you've done, but also what you plan to do on the state level and the committees that you serve on. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in your district.
Thank you so much, Dr. Claville. And so we've had the opportunity to do some amazing things representing not only my district, but I think Hampton Roads and the entire Commonwealth for that matter. But just two quick things to come to mind. In the way of workforce development, opportunities, jobs, skills, and clean energy, I was happy to, on the House side, sponsor legislation that Senator Louise Lucas and Senator McClellan, Jennifer McClellan out of Richmond, we, and as well as Senator Monty Mason on the peninsula, we all championed, and on the House side, I championed offshore wind to generate clean energy off the coast of Virginia Beach and North Carolina, enough power to energize and provide electrification and power for somewhat over 1 million people here in the grid. And so those turbines are now stood up, and we are piping that energy into the grid even now and looking for ways to increase that, building more turbines. And you'll hear more about that in the very near future as the other turbines go up, and the ability to pump more energy here in the grid, and that with respect to clean energy here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And then, of course, I'll just push or pivot to this past session. Now, there was legislation that I championed that now has been signed by the governor and has become law that will help all Virginians, all consumers. And that is, we all are online, right, searching, querying, Googling, looking for information, signing on to websites. All of our information is out there. But in Virginia now, consumers have a right to know what's being collected about them when they're online. A lot of people don't know when you're online, when you're surfing, most of your personal identifiable information is being captured by the hosters of these websites. And they are sharing your information. They are selling your information. You don't believe me? Just search on something on the web and then go over to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever. And no sooner than you are on those sites, you notice you get the ads about it. That's because your information has been shared. Wow. It has been sold. And that continues, but no more in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I sponsored a legislation this past session that passed and has become law that says that you have a right as a consumer to know what's being collected about you. You have a right to delete that data. You have a right to correct the data. And then in the egregious behavior of them selling your information without your knowledge, and certainly not for the purpose intended for which you were online in the first place, if they're selling your information, you have a right to say, I don't want you to sell my information.
That's huge. That is huge.
Guess what? The big companies can't look at you and shake their finger and tell you what they're not going to do, because the enforcement comes from the Attorney General's office. So good luck, Eric Claville, if you want to say to Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, IBM, don't sell my information. You think they're going to listen to you as an individual?
Probably not.
As opposed to the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia taps them on the shoulder and say, correct that behavior. I think they're more inclined to listen to what it is that the Attorney General's office is saying, as opposed to a private citizen trying to go up against them giants like that.
Absolutely.
So we took the posture that we did and made Virginia only the second state in the country with consumer data protection in that regard. There is no federal law, so states are starting to stand up their own laws to try to protect their consumers. California was first, and Virginia was second. Wow. And so we're going to continue to work in this regard. to try to see what we can do to expand the rights for consumers and to fight on behalf of the people. That's what we've been doing. That's what I've been doing in this 77th House District all of my life, and I plan to continue doing so.
Absolutely. Now, look, I appreciate that because, you know, your privacy is your privacy, and nobody should own it but you, and nobody should be making money off of it but you. And
That's
so
right.
I support that legislation, not just here in the Commonwealth, but really across the country and across the world with net neutrality and understanding how we, you know, how our information is shared and collected. Now, I'll also support, now this is just me, I'm throwing out a possible bill here. Let's support some legislation on these unsolicited calls that are coming to our cell phones and our house phones in order to the information that they're gathering there. So if you need help with that legislation, put it in. Let me know. Well, you know, we'll help you drop the bill.
Absolutely. But that's another thing that my bill is to do. If you stop sharing the information and selling the information, we can slow down. And I don't know about you, Dr. Claville, but I'm sick and tired of getting 1,000 calls telling me that the warranty on my vehicle has expired.
Absolutely.
And it's because these people are selling and sharing your information, and these folks are taking advantage of that.
Wow. Absolutely. And again, is understanding those little things. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it does add up and help everybody. Delegate Hayes, tell us about the 3 committees that you were on in the House and how important they are to our district and also to the Spartan Nation.
Yeah, absolutely. I happen to serve on the Health, Welfare, and Institutions Committee, which deals with all things healthcare, including the rights of our doctors, our nurse practitioners, all of our medical professionals, the hospitals, any regulations and laws that apply to hospitals, et cetera. That's where we were able to begin that final push for Medicaid expansion, to get that through that committee and make it to the floor, if you will, and give us the opportunity to vote on it. Another committee I happen to be so blessed to serve on is the Appropriations Committee. I think I've told this story before, but when I was a student at Norfolk State in my final years there, I had the great opportunity and privilege to stand there with Dr. Harrison B. Wilson as he received our first African-American governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, L. Douglas Wilder. And in that meeting with him as a student, we stood there as he said, you know, it's great to be a legislator. It's great to serve in the General Assembly, but it's even better to be in a position not just to get pieces of the pie and to wait for the pieces of the pie, but to have your knife, your hand on the knife as the pie is being cut. And so when it comes to where the Commonwealth's finances and resources will be appropriated, the Appropriations Committee is where that happens in the House.
Wow.
And so I'm so happy to be an appropriator and a member of the Appropriations Committee. And then the subcommittees, even under appropriations, I serve on higher education. Hello, Norfolk State. And so in addition to that, I serve as the chair of the subcommittee of appropriations that deals with capital outlay. For those who don't know, that's any of the capital projects in the Commonwealth of Virginia for state-owned property. So properties on our college campuses, building structures, new buildings and replacement of those buildings, et cetera. What a wonderful position to be in, to be the chair of capital outlay of appropriations. And then finally, I happen to be so blessed to be the chair of communications, technology, and innovation. So anything dealing with technology, broadband, cybersecurity, NASA, space research, those bills, drones, unmanned systems, all of that comes before my committee. And so I have the opportunity to help along from an equity lens to make sure that everybody is included when it comes to this age of Internet of Things and the application thereof across the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Absolutely. You're listening to WNSB. It's the new sound of Hot 91, the soul of VA, here on the campus of Norfolk State University. This is Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We're talking with Delegate Cliff Hayes, NSU alum and representative for District 77, running for re-election along with all other House members this November 2nd, where we'll elect our new governor, lieutenant governor, and our new attorney general. Delegate Hayes, in our last part of our show, tell us about, we've talked about the gains that have come about that could be lost if the House is not kept, in the number that it currently is. In other words, the other side of the aisle may be looking to turn around some of those gains that really have helped us in healthcare, fighting health inequity, in access to voting, providing more access, but also providing individuals whose rights were taken away, and also providing opportunity for new wind energy, a new industry, also opportunities to have more broadband service to help our distance learning and school learning that we saw in the pandemic hindered a lot of our K through 12 and higher education students. This session coming up in 2022 is just as important. Let us know a few of the things that in this legislative session we're going to take on and that you have on your radar that really will affect our communities.
Absolutely. And we're just going to continue the fight that we've been fighting for many generations prior to us. I often tell the story about us winning the championship when I played for Norfolk State, and we were right there on the baseball field, beat St. Augustine for the CIAA championship, and running off the field. I was excited, and former athletic director and the late Dick Price stood there, gave me a great big hug, and I said, Coach, what do we owe you for this education and this experience? And he pointed over to the ROTC that was doing PT exercises, and they lined up one by one, and they ran up to a huge wall with a rope, grabbing the rope, climbing and scaling the wall. He said, but notice none of them take the rope with them. Every last one of them, as they scale the wall, they throw the rope back because they know a bunch of people are coming after them. How dare we be so selfish as to take the rope with us? And so he went on to say, you don't owe me a thing. All I ask is that you throw the rope back. Throw the rope back. And that's what we're here for. We're here to make sure that the gains that the Commonwealth has been made with us here today, that we make sure that other people are able to enjoy some of those freedoms and some of the resources of the Commonwealth and some of the laws that have been put in place that have been fought for so long by the leaders whose shoulders we stand on. And so we'll continue to fight for public education before we dare take resources and put them into private schools away from the public space, because until we have enough resources in our public education system, we don't need to be taking away from that and giving it to the private schools, et cetera. So we need to support our public education system. We need to support our teachers and the wraparound services. We need to make sure that the teachers are paid above the national average. That's something that we're going to be working on. We need to support our health care frontline workers. If ever before, we ought to appreciate them more in this COVID situation. These people are out here working hard all day long, 24 hours a day, then have to go home to their families on top of that.
That's
and
right.
Then we don't want to pay them minimum wage. Please, come on. You're talking about you want to open up the economy, et cetera. We need to get people back to work. And so who do you think is out there waiting tables and cleaning up hotel rooms, et cetera? We need to pay people for what they're worth.
Come on.
And so we need to expand the minimum wage here in the Commonwealth of Virginia and to implement it in a faster pace. We had to compromise a late transition, if you will, in order to get the minimum wage passed, but it's transitioning too slowly and implemented too slowly by a certain date. But we're going to work to accelerate that date and make sure that people are paid much sooner what they are worth here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. When it comes to affordable health care, we need to make sure that that's happening in every way. In every way. Yes, we did expand Medicaid here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but there's still some other work to be done where we can make things a little bit more fair and equitable. And so we're going to continue that fight and to continue that work. When it comes to legalization of marijuana here in the Commonwealth, we see that it's no longer acceptable to arrest people for small amounts of marijuana in their possession here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so we're going to make sure that we not only focus on that, but to look at the horrendous effects of that type of policy on families from the past. Folks with their records are ruined and messed up. They couldn't get jobs. They've been incarcerated because they couldn't bail themselves out of jail. So cash bail is out there. If you don't have enough money, then, yeah, you go to jail. But if somebody else has enough money, they can bond out, continue to work, continue to take care of their family, continue to play with their children, continue to do the homework with their children, continue to go to PTA meetings. Look at the difference and what that makes in the quality of life of someone who couldn't afford to get bailed out of jail. And so we're going to look at all of these things and continue the fight for equity and justice here in this Commonwealth of Virginia.
Absolutely. When we talk about equity, there's one, and of course we're here on one of the historical HBCU campuses, public institutions in the Commonwealth, and the largest HBCU here in the Commonwealth. And when we talk about equity, we know that our HBCUs have done more with less. And, you know, we hold that as a badge of honor. But at the same time, we shouldn't have to do more with less, especially when there's more out there. There's been several articles written, opinion articles, regarding equity in our public HBCUs and providing historical funding to them outside of its appropriations due to historical underfunding. We know that there is a large pot of money, a little bit over $1 billion available for funding certain things. And we know that this is a budget year. All right. So that's another thing with this legislative session. It is a budget year. Can you talk to us about the importance of funding our HBCUs here in Norfolk State and our mother, Virginia State? But as we told the president of Virginia State, you know, we're just like the United States and Britain. You know, even though the United States came out of Great Britain, they're still our mother, but we stand on our own too. And we're doing phenomenal and doing great things. But can you talk about the importance of being able to bridge that gap and answer the call of historical inequity in our HBCU, public HBCUs?
No, absolutely. We know historically the challenges that our people have had here in Virginia, including some issues with regards to where we could leave high school and go on to college, go on to law school. Many people were turned down. They couldn't even go to law school here in Virginia. They had to go outside the state to get their law degrees, et cetera. That was the past in that regard, but some of the same little remnants, if you will, all through the state code continues. And so that just emboldens folk to a point where they think that they don't have to fund HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities here in the Commonwealth at the same tune of other schools by formula. And so we needed to make sure that we make those changes. And so there has been historic amounts of funding that have come to both Virginia State and Norfolk State in these last 2 years. Mind you, voting does make a difference. For the first time, we have the first female Speaker of the House here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, who, in her very wisdom, Speaker Eileen Phillicorn, who understands the importance of equity, reached out, and guess what? Out of the 14 committees in the House of Delegates, 7 of those committees are chaired by members of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. Everything from education, transportation, to appropriations, to communications technology and innovation. All of that's being chaired by members of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, the Courts of Justice Committee even. So voting does make a difference when it comes to the funding of our HBCUs. Norfolk State is getting historic funding coming to the university because of who is where and who understands the importance of funding and making sure that our students give a quality education while they're here. Just not too long ago, I remember taking a tour with Dr. Javon Adams-Gaston, as many of us of the Black Caucus were there, and we visited the nursing school. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the first class training facilities we have with our nursing community and
Absolutely.
our nursing students here on the campus. When it comes to the School of Business, we're going to do some things there. When the science building was there when I was there, and I'm sure it was there many years even before I was there. And so we need to do something in the way of upgrading the science, having a new science building there. We needed to expand the early childhood education facilities for our students there. And I was happy to sponsor an appropriation, a budget amendment to appropriate $2 million to expand the tech building where that is being held right now to allow for some of the more modern facilities for helping our young people and training them and the like. So we'll continue all of that and the facilities, the physical plant there on the campus to improve all of that so that our students can receive to the tune that others get on their campuses. We may not have the deep endowments that some of the other schools have, but we're going to make sure that we get our fair share when it comes to the public funding that's supposed to be applied to the learning labs here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Absolutely. And like you said, we don't have the deep endowment, but we don't have the deep endowment yet. So the endowment will be growing under our current leadership. And as you mentioned, the historic appropriations for the new funding for the science building, fine arts, our other buildings that are coming online. And I tell you what, when I bring guests or guests come here to the university, we take them to the academic quad and they are just blown away at how beautiful the campus is here. I mean, it's a beautiful campus and is only going to get better because of individuals like yourself who are fighting in the legislature for us, but not just the legislature, but out there in the community. You wear your green and gold, you and your family, very proud, and we thank you so much for your support. And in the last 30 seconds, I just want to give you an opportunity to give our listeners a final word as they go out and consider who they're voting for in this election.
Absolutely. Just want to remind people that I am, again, C.E. Cliff Hayes, Jr., my ancestors' wildest dream and imaginations that one of theirs would be in the Virginia General Assembly, serving in the House. I represent the 77th House District, which includes parts of South Norfolk in the city of Chesapeake, Indian River, South Norfolk, Riverwalk, Crestwood, and the like. And so we certainly hope that you will cast your vote if you're in Greenbrier. All of this area includes where I represent And we ask you to go to www.cliffhays.com to find out more information, or you may call our office at 757-364-0272. Be blessed, and as always, behold
the green and gold. Delegate Hayes, thank you so much for joining us here on State of Water. And to the listeners, again, our time is now short, is winding up, but we want to thank you for joining us on this Sunday at 1 p.m. But guess what? You could join us next week as we continue our conversation with the candidates here in this historic election of 2021. Again, Stay the Water, where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. Until next time, be well. God bless.